Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I'm really looking forward to moderating this panel. I'm really looking to this conversation because we have a great group up here, some of my best friends in this industry, some of the best who really know their stuff, and they really all see this industry from different angles. But connected, we're all going for the same outcomes. One thing that stood out in our prep session that we had, many of them, we're not lacking ideas as an industry. We know where the challenges are. We're lacking on execution. We tend to struggle in turning ideas into consistent, scalable action. So today we're going to have a conversation about how we shift that, how we actually start to make moves and change things in this industry. This is meant to be constructive, forward-looking conversation. We're going to challenge some assumptions, but the goal is progress. And ideally, we walk away with a clearer sense of what moving forward actually looks like. Before we get started, I'm going to let the panelists go ahead and introduce themselves, and then we'll go ahead with questions. So, Ms. Johanna?
I'm Johanna Granados with Verisk, and we are the providers of PPW, Exact PRM, and Proven.
Everybody. I'm Aaron Cuney with Solid Foundations. We are a national prop pres and inspections business. Recently, over the last couple months, we've started to layer in support for the SFR industry, doing construction management, renovations, turns, CapEx projects. And with our sister company, Ascribe, we have a full suite of valuations, REO asset management, et cetera, on both residential and commercial side.
Raquel Pasala with ServiceLink. We are also a national field service provider, also offering end-to-end solutions on the mortgage tech and servicing side, and happy to be here.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Jody Gaines with G7 Service Group and Claims Recovery Financial Services. G7 is a national inspection pres renovation company, and Claims Recovery is we file investor and government claims.
Hello, my name is Mindy Seeger, and I am EVP of Strategy and Business Development for First Rate Field Services, and we are also a national provider. We do property preservation all the way through to SFR, turns, renovation services as well.
Thank you. And I'm Talia, President of Spectrum. We are National Field Services, and then we also do asset management and sell real estate. Before we talk about building anything new, let's talk about what is actually getting in the way. So as I ask you these questions, I want you guys to think about, in your respective roles, what are we holding on to things that no longer add value or could be done in such a simpler way? So Jody, I'll start with you. From a regulatory and claims standpoint, where do you see misalignment between guidelines and real-world execution, and what could realistically be streamlined or standardized?
So misalignment, right? Like one of the biggest areas that I have been frustrated with since this guideline came out, if you will, there's a couple of them. So there's interest curtailments, right, from the investors, insurers. And I mean, it can be punitive, right? Like a lot of times we'll say the punishment does not fit the crime. And so, you know, Talia and I, we ran into each other yesterday and we're even chatting about that. So you've got your interest curtailments. And then on top of that, it's coupled when it comes to prop pres, especially in the FHA space, where if you fail those timelines, your property preservation is no longer reimbursable. And like this to me is so confusing, right? Isn't our job to protect and preserve communities, yet we're punishing the servicers and I mean potentially ultimately the vendors by not wanting to reimburse them, right? So I mean, I as I was thinking about that, first of all, it's again, the punishment doesn't really fit the crime. But at the same time too, like minimally, why not reimburse what the allowable would be? Maybe if we're too long or we're above, obviously we can't request that reimbursement. But at minimum, why not give us the standard interest that we should be entitled to on a loan? And why not give it reimburse the minimum property preservation that is in the guideline? We're not asking you to do more. And then, of course, if there are over-allowables, well, there's a process for it. And the investors, insurers can review it, and they can still deny it. So anyways, I think that would be a big win for the servicers and the vendors if we could get the investors and insurers just to reconsider that. And I think the best way to do that is through conversations and advocacy.
Yep, for sure. Aaron, from the field perspective, what requirements or expectations create friction without actually improving any outcomes?
Wow. Well, coming off of our last panel, I hope everybody was all here. I keep hearing Kelly ringing in my ear about consistency and documentation, right? We have multiple clients, multiple vendors, and they're all hearing slight nuances from each of us. And there's no true value being created out of all of those differentiations. And that creates a massive amount of friction for our partners. And we hear about it all the time. The lack of consistency. It makes it more difficult to leverage technologies that are out there now to help if we're trying to consolidate 17 different versions of some property condition report. And trying to bring those together and be any sort of consistency. If you don't have the right infrastructure, then all of the new technology doesn't help anybody. And so I think there's some leadership needed from us really together here on this panel to drive some of that with our clients and with our partners.
Yeah, and since you bring up systems, I'm going to go ahead and jump to Johanna. I think that's a perfect segue. And Johanna, I love your perspective because you did inspections since you were 18. You owned your own field services company. You worked for multiple nationals, and now you're at a technology company. So from a systems and data standpoint, where is complexity being created unnecessarily?
Yeah, I mean, I will echo everything Aaron said. I mean, we're over-engineering everything, right? Or over-complicating things. And a lot of it is multiple systems, right? We're hopping from one to another, and we need to start connecting them better, and also deciding what needs to be put in the system at first. And then I think it speaks to what Jody was speaking about too. We have line item allowables, but then we're still doing all these multi-stage approvals, right? By the time the person in the field gets an approval, it's gone through so many steps. And it's like the telephone game. By the time it goes through each system and each person's interpretation of the rules, it's taking way too much time. So we're building more for, we're putting controls in place, but we're prioritizing the control over the flow. And so we really need to start only collecting data that's actionable and then making sure that it flows all the way through the chain. So, pick a system or systems that connect to each other well so that we don't have to take something out and then put it back in, and then we have to get, through, so many layers. So really just trying to be thoughtful about how we're connecting systems.
For sure. And Mindy, operationally, where are we spending time and effort that actually doesn't move anything forward?
Well, I really have to echo what Aaron and Johanna are saying, and that is it's data transfer, copy, paste, documentation, and we're not doing it in just one system or our system of record. We're having to do it in multiple systems. And so it's really wise to reevaluate your tech stack on a regular basis to see how everything is working together so you can maximize your APIs if they're cost effective. Sometimes they're not. And then also to where people incorporate AI and looking at all of the manual transfer of data that's going on and attack those processes. I really think that's important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Talia, if I could jump in, there's one other thing that I think this connects back and will probably resonate with a lot of folks, is going back to properties. The number of all of these things that we're talking about have very tangible costs. And that means if we have data that's not being appropriately moved from one place to the next, someone has to go back. And if we haven't effectively conveyed the instructions of what needs to happen at a property, we have to go back. That costs time and money. It costs frustration with our vendors. It makes what's already slim margins even less tenable. It creates friction between partners and those sorts of things. That's up to us. We have implemented on our teams an internal metric where we are tracking our own team members against the go back rate essentially, and it's because of how important that is both to our clients and our vendors to be the best partners we can be.
Yeah, absolutely. And Raquel, at the servicer level, where do you see opportunities to simplify without increasing risk?
I think we all have the same consensus across the board, and we're all seeing, the lack of just communication, the redundancy, there's continual back and forth and paperwork that's involved. And communication is obviously key, but technology, everyone's looking at the advancement of technology and how they enhance that for the industry overall. I mean, that's the only way to continue is to hear what's happening and how we can align ourselves and fix those processes. From the standpoint of we have so many different entities that touch these properties, and they're all different, but also the same in the end goal of what we're trying to do for our clients. We're trying to continue to obviously to protect the values of these properties, and but simplifying this and not overcomplicating it is instrumental in what we're doing. And I think technology is for sure one of the ways that we can do it with not adding more to it, but creating more efficiencies, not as complicated.
Yeah, absolutely. Now the more question is, what do we replace all of this with? If we had the opportunity to rethink parts of this industry with today's knowledge and experience that we all now have, what would we design differently? So Mendy, what does a more efficient operational model actually look like in practice?
I would love to have just one model that we all use, but I know that's not possible. I really go back to evaluating your tech stack and figuring out ways to optimize how all of your systems work together. Unfortunately, especially in the SFR side of the industry, we're having to work in multiple systems, and it really complicates the process. It really increases the amount of opportunity for error and transferring data. And I think that, we need to partner with our CTOs in the industry and really make sure that we are optimizing our technology so that we can cut down on the manual processes and make the system flow as efficiently as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And Aaron, you kind of touched on this a little bit, but what would a sustainable balance between cost, risk, execution, Iran, everything else going on actually look like in the field?
Yeah, that's really tough. So we spend a lot of time, and I just for context for everybody, I'm probably not only am I have the least amount of hair on the panel, I've probably spent the least time in this side of the world. I spent probably close to 20 years in the single family rental space, and I think one of the interesting things is the trade-off is always we need you to do all three, and that's everybody's response is the trade-off is don't trade off or else you're going to lose business. And so that is the constant challenge. So we are continuing to look at opportunities to leverage technology, and I'm challenging our teams to do that, not just from the desktop and not just for the leadership, but picture yourself as the person going to the home. How do we make it easier for them to know what to do, to know the right amount to pay, to know what's fair and reasonable, and then we can take that and sort of take that up the chain, if you will, and make sure that what we are doing is being great partners to help a more fluid process. We talked a little bit on the last discussion about the importance of effective communication. We as vendors now have the tools to get the extensions that we need to effectively document and communicate and those things that will enable our clients to effectively sort of help be good partners with us. We have those tools. We got to take them, and we got to utilize them. That's our responsibility.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Ms. Jody, what would better alignment between regulation and operations realistically look like?
Oh, better alignment where your investors and insurers are aligned, right? Wouldn't that be a lovely thing? So we were all kind of operating off the same sheet of music, if you will. That goes, timeframes, allowables, what am I going to do? It's just so impactful to everybody. We talk about systems. Well, if I've got one rule, one guideline, how easy are our systems going to be? So, I think it just creates tremendous efficiency for everybody. So.
Yeah, for sure. And Ms. Johanna, what is actually solvable today with technology, and what would that fix first, except the commands module, after the commands module?
Good plug there, Talia, for yourself. And even though your boss thinks that technology solves all problems, that may not be true. No, but technology can actually be a great thing, but we really need to start eliminating like redundancy. I think the biggest opportunity isn't new technology, because there's lots of technology out there. It's removing the duplicate work. And we need to have like a single source of truth. And I know we're going to speak to it a little bit later, but I think shameless plug for the NAMFS PCR form and the inspection form. Why are we not all using a standard form? There's no secret sauce in data that's collected. The secret sauce is in your quality, your timeliness, your customer service, things like that. So the technology already exists. We just need to capture it once in the field correctly. There shouldn't be the vendor writing the bid and then the internal team writing the bid and then the offshore reviewing the bid. And then, I don't know how many people are doing a bid. It's insane how much work is going into some of this. So, having real-time visibility when something's done in the field. In fact, we met with someone today who said that they actually are looking at the photos live as they're being taken on the app and paying attention when their vendors are there and talking to them and saying, hey, you missed this. It's like, those are kinds of things that exist. Why send them back 5 times when you can maybe look while they're out in the field? So, just centralize it and fix first the centralization, and then we can go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. And Raquel, from a broader industry perspective, what would better alignment across stakeholders look like?
I think that, NAMFS is a critical component, and a part of this is bringing all the stakeholders together in one room, and it's continual communication that's part of that process as well. But, to kind of reiterate what everyone's kind of shared here, which is standardization of the inspections, easy to use shared technology that's not so complicated, that's not redundant, and then obviously aligning ourselves so that it's a smoother transition than what we have. We are constantly asking for more things and requiring more things, and we understand that there's a cost that goes with that as well, time and money that goes with that. But I think to align ourselves consistently, there has to be more alignment as far as the systems that we use, that they're shared, and that it's kind of creates better results for everyone.
Yeah, for sure. And even with the best intentions, things tend to get layered over time. Where do you think that's actually happened here? Johanna, how much of this is truly a technology issue versus an alignment issue?
Yeah, this is coming from a tech person, so I'm going to say it's more of an alignment issue. But no, really, if you think about it, even in technology, we see misalignment a lot. And so we really need to start looking at what are the expectations, the incentives, what are the success metrics. Because if you layer tech on top of misalignment, it's just creating more complexity. So, as mentioned, like the NAMP standard form, if everybody was using that, and then it was mapped everywhere else in the industry, it's one source of truth. So if we can start aligning those expectations, then it's easier. Even in the field, the vendor in the field, if they have one form versus, there might be a couple because there'll be grass cut and things like that, but if there's one standard PCR form, they know every question that they would ask every time that they're out there. They know what to expect. But if they're dealing with, 30, 40 different forms, they're missing things.
It can make sense why they're missing things.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think just really trying to get away from customization where it's not necessary. There's certain data that needs to be collected. Let's collect that data and no more.
Agreed.
I also think that I completely agree with that. And I, having led learning and development organizations before, you try to teach someone differently every single time. There's no possible way that you can get consistent output, right? I think it also, one of the things that we've talked about a lot in our preparation is the feedback we get is also not consistent, right?
Yeah.
And so if we were giving consistent input to them, then we could hold them more accountable to have consistent feedback back to us. That eliminates friction, and that leads to better and more efficient execution, timelines, et cetera. So I think there's a huge opportunity here as NAMFS, and candidly, that's one of the reasons I wanted to get involved in the
Yep.
organization, is to try to drive that sort of connection where you can have consistency in and consistency out.
Absolutely. And Ms. Jody, I've been excited to talk to you about this question. Where does interpretation of guidelines create more complexity than the guidelines themselves?
Oh my goodness, right? Like, where do we get started? I mean, right? I mean, the guidelines, they're complex, right? And, you ask 5 different people, what does this mean? You potentially get 5 different answers. And like, it doesn't have to be this hard. Part of it is just, just more information, if you will, more transparency, sometimes from the investors and insurers. Like, don't make this a guessing game. At the end of the day, we really just want to do the right thing. We want to protect your interests. We want to do it right. We want to do it on time. So let's partner a little bit better together. So, did I answer your question?
Do you think we hide behind guidelines?
I think we do hide behind guidelines, yes, yeah. Maybe like I'm really good at this, so maybe as a result I'm better because of this guideline, or maybe sometimes it's putting the fear, in people because of guidelines, which, there is certainly some fear associated with that, because if you're not following and complying, you're at risk, right? I'm at risk of losing money, penalties, reputation, so yeah.
Yeah, I think we absolutely overcomplicate them. And I see a gray area and a guideline as a gas pedal to go, right? Or a lot of people see a big red sign and I'm like, nope. Now, I'm not saying go YOLO and start bringing everybody's rules, but there's a lot of regs that I see like, hey, I would get on my vendors and say, you need to do this. Well, it's not in the regs. Right. It's not in the regs not to do it, right? Go do this. So I think we just make things harder because we're just worried about risk, and that kind of gets in the way of delivering for our clients, for sure. All right, Ms. Mundy, where do processes expand beyond what's actually necessary?
Well, if I understand the question correctly, my mind goes to communications. I mean, just like Jody was saying, yes, 5 different people, you get 5 different answers. And I think with comms, we are just really overcomplicating that. I think it's kind of a result of having to update the client, update the client system of record, updating our system of record, communicating with the vendors. We're on our phones texting them, or we're in the chat, or we're calling them, or we're emailing them. And there's all different flows of information going on, and trying to keep everything aligned, keep everything consistent, and having everybody updated in a consistent way, I think, is just where we're really getting it wrong, and we need to do better to try to improve it. But it's difficult to do.
For sure. And Raquel, where do you see disconnects between intent and execution at a higher level?
I think that, we often see what we want to have happen versus what actually happens, out there. And that ties back into the technology, and fixing that so that the communication is more real time. Regulators and servicers and investors are constantly changing the requirements of what they expect and what they want to see. And then you have to convey that down through 4 different channels. And how do you do that in a way that it's consistent and that people get the information and understand what they're kind of ingesting, because it's just so much different information based on the clients. So I look at it from the standpoint of just the technology and how that's communicated and being consistent in that communication as well.
Yeah, for sure. A lot of this points to something deeper. I want to spend a few minutes on industry realities, things that influence how we operate, even if we don't always say them directly. Erin, what's a reality in the field that isn't always fully understood at other levels?
It's interesting. There are a lot of them, and so I'm trying. I think one of the most difficult things is that we are dealing with an increasing. We've talked a bunch about what actually happens in the home. We are dealing with an increasingly rural default portfolio, and we haven't talked about that a ton over the course of the day yet. But the fact of the matter is that when you are offsetting a 3-hour drive outside of a major metro with a huge amount of volume in a city, that's one thing to ask of a vendor. If you are just saying, sorry, you got to go 3 hours out of the way for the exact same fee and the exact same SLA, that reality just doesn't work. Some of my favorite calls when I first got into this side of the business about 1.5 years ago were from my friend Bill up here, who would be out in the car saying, I just got such and such back from one of your QC team members, and I just want to tell you what the chances are of me ever going back to that house for you. And it was a very friendly engagement, and I learned a lot from it. And there's some, like, we've got to make it make sense a little bit here, right? And there's some reality that it was great to get a dose of that myself. It also helped me as I got to know what some of those realities are. There's some things that we need to step in and take and make better and make work. And of course, there's always some lessons that we have to learn in the field to get it right the first time, right? But that has to be a partnership. It can't be one way, or else, I think somebody said earlier that we can't do our job without our clients. We can't do our job without our vendors. If we're not good partners to both, then we're going to be in trouble. And that's
Yeah, absolutely. That's good. Jody, what's a constraint in regulation or compliance that people underestimate?
Well, that you have to do it, like you've got to do it, or you're just gonna, plain be out, money or risk or compliance or reputation, right? So it's just really making sure that you truly understand and everything that everybody said, right? Like, how do we interpret it? Are we all on the same page? How do we interpret it with our client? Do the clients agree? Like, that's so critical. It's not just, well, we've got it, we're good to go, let's go. No, that's not it. That's only half the battle, maybe, if you're lucky. You've got to make sure that all parties are in alignment, and that we're taking into consideration maybe somebody's a difference of opinion. And then, from there, okay, well, it's not really how we see it. Do we try to go back to the investor or insurer to get that clarification? And then just the whole implementation. Like, it is time. It's not just the systems. It's policies and procedures. It's training the staff. So it's timely. It's expensive. And then, have I said interpretation yet?
Yes. Mindy, what's an operational challenge that tends to get overlooked?
Feelings. It's actually feelings. People feeling seen and heard, especially all the stakeholders. But the vendors, the boots on the ground, they're the ones giving us the information right there from the property. And we need to make sure that they are heard, they are understood. We also need to be focusing on our internal staff, making sure that they are feeling understood and heard, and then translating all that into proper and consistent documentation. But we really need to focus on our culture, and we can't get so busy that we don't pay attention to that, because you really want people to feel like they are a part of the organization, no matter what angle they're looking at the organization or operating from.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's a good one. Johanna, I know we talk a lot about technology, and yes, my boss thinks technology can save the world. But what's a misconception about what technology can or cannot solve?
I think the reality is technology cannot fix broken structures. And we get so many requests for, new features or things, especially in PPW, that is really around a bad process. And so we have to pause a lot of times and say, okay, is that the way that it should be done? And it's not a company, it's kind of an industry issue. We've always done it that way, and not thinking about, is there a better way to do it? And so, it can reduce manual work and improve visibility and standardize data, but it cannot fix too many handoffs. It can't align incentives. It can't replace accountability. So those are the things we really need to start looking at is, let's focus on what it can do and then fix the things outside systems that are broken. And I look at technology as it can scale a good process, but it can also scale a broken one, and you don't want to do that. So you've got to really look at what's broken before you put it into technology.
1,000%. Too often we Band-Aid over Band-Aid over Band-Aid over Band-Aid, right? And we didn't actually fix the original problem that was really small, and you just made it way bigger. Yeah. And Raquel, what's a broader industry dynamic we need to acknowledge more openly?
I think one of the things that we need to be more honest about in conversation is how hard it is to move so quickly in this overregulated environment. And, the expectation is you have to, these timelines and milestones, and you have to complete them within all these different elements. And then the factors that there's overregulation, there's all these investor requirements. In our site, our network, our net worth is our network. And, the amount of work that goes into these networks and what they're doing, and our vendors, you guys are incredible with what you have to deal with. And you're not just dealing with one different vendor, you're dealing with multiple. And all the different lines of business that you've had to kind of approach and get into just to sustain yourselves. But that partnership and having that partnership is so critical, and acknowledging the challenges that are out there that we completely understand, but voicing that and making sure it's recognized.
Yeah, absolutely. So with all of that in mind, this is a question for all of you guys. We can go down the panel. With all that in mind, what's slowing progress down?
I'll go ahead and say, I think even though the process is broken, we're comfortable in it. And progress is uncomfortable. And you have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable if you want to move ahead and grow.
I think right now we're just in such a difficult time, right? Like, we've got a shortage of staff with the regulators, right? The investors, insurers, right? There are a lot of changes going on, and they're changing their MCMs, who's getting, becoming new to the process. So, like, all those things, they really add up. So, yeah. I think that's all I got.
I think progress often gets slowed down by, old habits and processes that have been built up over the years that just have been unchanged. And people stick with that, and it's hard to get people to change, to do something new, or to, evolve that way. And really, it's, careful innovation. The communication is just so critical, whether you're doing it verbally or through technology. But it's really simplifying things in the best way possible, consolidating all the information that we have, and conveying that out, in unison.
So I think this one is interesting because I would say volume has been a reason that people haven't changed over the last, you hear that over the last several months, years. Volume is so low. There's not enough volume to support investing in change. Well, then what happens? Then the volume comes, right? And everybody's overwhelmed, like, we can't change now, right? And so it's sort of this vicious cycle where who's going to invest in it? Who's going to take the leadership? It's going to be interesting how people make those decisions, because you can't always say there's a reason not to do it, or you can, and you never do it, right? And so I think that's one of the exciting things for me, is figuring out what's the right time to invest in changing, and where do you have the flexibility to do that as a business, and where do we need to do it collectively as an industry?
Now. Yeah, and then for me, I think really the lack of standardization is really a struggle. If we can standardize, then it becomes easier to scale. And so when you have multiple companies connected on the same, either on the same platforms or connected platforms, and then using the same sheet of music when it comes to forms and photo requirements and work order instructions and all of those things, I think. But right now, we are definitely not aligned, and we don't really have standardization.
Really, and I think it also takes bringing in fresh faces, right? I think we've all been doing this for so long. We become comfortable. We know how to operate when volumes go wild. And But we need new perspectives and new people who are eager to get into this business, who are eager to help change things, who want to do all the things we need to. I think it's definitely how do we get people into our industry, because we're all not aging. We're all aging faster probably than we want to. Well, you guys, not me, but we probably want to definitely see, think about who's coming up behind us, for sure. And if we leave it here, it's just another good conversation. So let's talk about what actually moves things forward. Keep it simple. What's one thing this audience can do differently starting tomorrow? That's for everybody.
Well, I'll go first. If you would like the NAMFS standard forms, there's an inspection and a PCR form. You can get those through NAMFS, or if you're using Verisk technology, we would be happy to load it into your system so that your vendors can start using a standard form. The more that are using the one, and by the way, I don't know, for anybody who isn't familiar with the NAMFS standard forms, committees were formed to create those forms, and they came from national servicers, regionals, local vendors, and technology providers, I think maybe were involved, I can't remember. But there was consensus across the industry of what do we actually need to ask in the field, and how should it flow? Because flow is important as well. When someone's walking a property, don't send them upstairs, downstairs, outside, inside. And so those forms are very well thought out, although Talia found one thing that we missed when
Sure did.
Yeah, yes, you did. But they're very well thought out, and if we can start there, it's only one thing, but one thing can make a change. So I would say if you are interested in the NAMFS form, you can get it from NAMFS or from Verisk.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah.
One thing that we can do, I think, I've been thinking a bunch since Mindy said this about listening to your team and investing in developing your team and making sure that they feel heard. And I would echo the same thing about vendors. I don't think we are spending enough time walking with our vendors, whether it's actually physically getting out there or whether it's spending time with them in their office or whatever. I think it's really important to make sure that you are seeing things from their perspective, and that one of the things that I emphasize with our team all the time is our job as leaders is to create clarity from ambiguity. If they are getting ambiguous direction, it's impossible for them to know how to act. If you trust that people want to do a good job, and they're not, in your opinion, that might be because they don't know what a good job is. And so let's be clear with them about what our expectations are. And that's something that we can all do today, which is be clearer in how we communicate our expectations and trust their positive intent that they are trying to do it, help them show them what better looks like.
I think it's, elevating the voices of the vendors that are out there and understanding the concerns that they have. I heard yesterday from an executive who said, if I call a vendor and I relay to them that I have a problem and they don't get back to me, or they say that's not my division, or I don't handle that, and then the issue just lies there and nothing gets solved or resolved. And, everyone can deliver really good news well, but not a lot of people are good at delivering bad news. And we have to listen to the bad news just as much as we listen to the good news and, celebrate those things. But the challenges are real. We need to hear about them. We need to collaborate about them across the board. We can all call each other. You end up developing really great friendships in this industry, and people become more like a family than they do in industry. But really conveying that information and understanding those and having those tough conversations, I think, is critical.
Yeah, I'm echo what I've heard so far. Collaboration is key. The feedback, communication is key. I would say it's got to be timely, right? Not months after the fact, but hopefully really quickly. Engagement kind of goes along with collaboration. And then, it's just always Kelly said it on the prior, what is going on today? Is our communication clear? Are our policies and procedures updated? Own it. You shouldn't have to have somebody come to you and ask for that. It's your company. Own it and take care of it and get it done. And be accountable. But, like Raquel said, the collaboration is key. Communication is key. And, just NAMFS, like, look at all the great work we're doing, right? And one voice, like, I've heard that a few times in the industry, but it's so true. Like, if we are collectively working together and having those types of communications that, again, I'll just go back to the investors and insurers because so many times they dictate, like, what we can and can't do. There's power in those numbers, so.
Yeah, for sure.
I think it also is really important, communication is so important and things go wrong. And it's how you respond is so important and how fast you respond is so important. And I would also like to add that making sure there's a safe environment for the communication and the information to flow so that you're getting the correct information. You don't want people to be afraid to report things. Especially when it's a bad situation, you want to get back to the client as soon as possible with as much accurate information as you can and have a game plan lined up. But it starts with making sure that the environment is safe enough for that flow of communication.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to take a second to connect a few threads. What stands out from the conversation is that these challenges are deeply connected. The decisions we make, how we price, how we structure processes, how we interpret requirements, and don't just impact our own organizations. They impact the industry. So progress doesn't necessarily come from one major change. Like Johanna said, it comes from consistent, intentional decisions made across all of our roles. Because if nothing changes, we'll be sitting at the Sheraton next year, having this exact same conversation all over again. And I think we all know our staff, our companies, and this industry deserves more than that. So I want to thank all of you today for this conversation, and hopefully get the NAMFS PCR form. Yes, shameless plug there. But hopefully this will help get your minds thinking about how we can continue to move this industry forward. So thank you.